Hey gang, what's up? Just Ehren right here. Welcome to the Canadian Looney Question Period Canada show, episode number 1. It's like we've never done any of these. Let's jump into it. We've got a couple of videos here to watch. Thank you all for tuning in. Should be a pretty wild and wacky week. This is a video that I shot yesterday. Pretty friggin' funny. Let's take a peek. All right, guys. Quick visit with my mom. See if we can spin this bad boy around and get out of here. So where were we? I think we were probably trashing some of these dirty liberals. We'll wait until we're outside to get back to that. This cart is great. It can go just about anywhere you'd want to go. Within reason. It's a jogging stroller. I should take a picture of it so you can see it. Innovative.
First floor.
If I had to buy a rig like this, would have cost me a couple grand. Made this one for under $100. Let's go. So let's discuss Francis Drouin. He's a liberal backbencher and very dislikable, unlikable. His mother wouldn't like him. Which one of these bins here is garbage? Come back to me, stroller. Come back to me. All right, gang. So, Frank Drouin. Yeah, let's take a peek at him. He's disgusting. Another one of these Fruit Loops playing their mind games. Think they're fooling Canadians. They're not fooling the ones that see it. So they should be more aware. Now, anyways, let's take a look at Frank Drouin. Who else do we have to trash here? Let's slam Anita Anand. She's our president of the Treasury Board, and sack of shit too. She's got one of the worst voices on the floor. She's a disgusting human being, fake and phony. Again, just lies all the time. Bad at her job. Obviously doesn't know how to talk to Canadians. Disgusting. I can't wait to see what happens in the next election. Let's take a look at this. Another rotten, filthy pig, Anita Anand. Anita Anand, you're disgusting. Did I bring my wallet? No. Damn it. That's why you should bring your wallet. I'd go and get something at the taco stand. Show a little support for any business initiative that we have in these areas. It's probably going to be safer. This is a very steep hill. This is Queen Street. Oh, here we go. This is what it looks like. Can we see a red house down there? That's my house. That's where I live. So that's where we're heading. Yeah, come and visit Godsboro, Nova Scotia, man. It's one of the nicest places in the country. Kindest people. Come and stay with me, you can go on the show. Or you can come on our show and help me make a couple of videos if that's your thing. Alright, we got this loser, Patty Haidu. She's Minister of Northern Affairs, I believe. Northern Affairs, Indigenous Affairs. Those poor people, if Patty Haidu is the person that's supposed to be taking care of you, I've got much sympathy and concern for your well-being. No doubt. Patty Haidu is a loser, a mean-spirited person too. Just a total see you next Tuesday. Anyways, Patty Haidu, let's take a peek at her too. Condescending. These liberals, man, would make you sick if you watch them too often. Or at least don't express yourself about it. Alright, guys. Liberal Kool-Aid is that it brings out the arrogance, stupidity, and dishonesty of people. It's a real bad deal for us guys. It's not a good deal at all. It's calmed down. The sun came out. It'll go away here shortly. I see a lot of gray in the direction we're heading, which is this. We're heading in this direction. We're gonna just do the loop around the water. Maybe we'll walk this dolly out onto one of the fingers. I don't know, I've got bad balance and open spaces make it worse. I don't know if you'd call it vertigo, but it's a weird reaction I have. This was the Rare Bird pub back in the day. Used to be a grocery store when I was a kid. I worked at the bar here. I was a bartender one summer. I bartended for 7 years when I was a younger man. Yeah, I think we are gonna probably take you out onto one of the fingers here. Oh, we're getting rained on. That's snow. What in the hell? My camera is not water resistant or weather resistant. Wonder what we're gonna get. We're gonna find out. Worst comes to worst, we pop the camera off, throw her in the bin. We talked about that piece of trash, Lena Diab, right? Watch this video. She is a monster. Literally a monster. No more boats on the docks. Oh no. Oh no. Yeah, and it's snowing. I don't know if the camera's picking up that, but it's snowing, so. Well, guess I'm gonna have to get the winter tires put on the dolly here. Let me know in the comments if you'd like to see one of these walkarounds done with some of our favorite MPs from the Conservative Party. That would be a fun video to make. And this is a heavy snow shower all of a sudden. I don't know if you can see how gray everything is. Try to pan it slow. Yeah. I think we're gonna have to head back to the house because I don't know how long this one's gonna last. What a weird thing. Oh, Lord. drenched. Jenna Suds. Jenna Suds sucks. When I first saw Jenna, I was like, oh, she's nice. But that was before I knew as much as I know now. She's a pig and a disaster, rotten troll. Just drank too much of the old liberal Kool-Aid. You know how that goes. My goodness, guys. This amount of water is not good for the camera. I know that. We're gonna wrap it up right there, guys. That's a good look at some of the liberal trash that we're dealing with. It's fun to vent about them. Canadians need to watch and know that they're getting ripped off by our liberal federal government in bed with the trashy NDP. It's so embarrassing what they're doing to our nation. Let me know in the comments if you like these walk-arounds. My name's Ehren, Canadian Looney. Like, share, subscribe, get notified. We'll be back with lots more videos. Take care, thanks for watching. Catch you next time. You wanted to see me run with the dolly, did you, Mr. Pickles? Now you can see it. Tires are flat on the dolly, it's a hard push. Get the camera back inside. Get this cut up. And also stay tuned for my tour of Boylston Park and a good hard look. Anyways, that was just a funny thing that happened yesterday. Pretty wacky, kind of out there. Anyways, guys, welcome. We are going to get into the politics here. Gonna try some of those walk-arounds for a quick intro to the shows. The shows are going to start occurring at 1/4 to the hour rather than a half hour. I'm trying to manage time better, and yeah, so that's what we'll be doing. Anyways, let's kick this off, guys. This is probably my favorite part of the show. Let's go. Everyone has an opinion about Canadian federal politics.
Oh, yeah.
I think our leader, Trudeau, I don't think I've ever heard him say a true word.
Oh, hello. Do you have a warrant to be here? Oh, yeah.
It's time for a change in this country, my friends. A real change.
Wiggle and squirm as you might, it is really hard to put lipstick on a pig.
When I'm Prime Minister, I will keep my promises.
WTF.
Here.
I know this place is where I am. No other place is better than. No matter where I go, I am proud to be Canadian. I am, you know I am. The worst that works.
Smash the like, guys.
This land is where I make my stand.
The one we call Canadian.
Gentlemen, beam me aboard.
I don't know if you've heard or not, but there's a pretty big election happening down south tomorrow. And It is going to affect us. This is a gross video that CBC did. It's very, very slanted. But we're going to watch it just because this election is huge and it will be a big impact on our country as well. Not for the reasons that they're saying on here, but this is just CBC propaganda.
Just across the border, our neighbors are about to make a decision that will affect all of us.
The relationship between the United States and Canada is a very personal one.
I would not build a wall on the Canadian border. I love Canada.
Harris or Trump? Predictable challenges or chaos?
Canada has treated us very badly. Canada was taking advantage of us, as usual.
Your cash is on the line.
There'd be a lot of short-run disruptions because businesses would need to find new suppliers, new customers, and almost surely a recession.
I wanted to find out what Canada can expect if Kamala Harris is in charge or if Donald Trump gets reelected. So I reached out across the border to two people who analyze this stuff every day. Terry Givens is a political science professor. She recently joined the faculty at the University of British Columbia. And Eric Miller is a Washington, D.C. based consultant. He advised Canadian governments and corporations on trade. Here are three things to expect under each possible presidency.
Starting with a return to Trump.
I'm going to put a 100, 200, 2,000% tariff.
The first big challenge? Tariffs. Donald Trump has promised to impose at least a 10% tariff on all goods imported to the U.S.
There's been no sense that current free trade agreement partners will be exempted.
That means everything Canada exports to the U.S. would be more expensive, and Americans would buy less.
And with a huge adjustment cost. For Canada, whose prosperity depends on exporting, the introduction of significant new tariffs from the United States would cause a great deal of pain.
Economists at TD Bank crunched the numbers. Here's their baseline expectation for GDP in Canada over the next couple of years, growth around 2%. Now, watch it drop when you factor in Trump's proposed tariffs.
Other countries will be encouraged to retaliate. So what it likely means is that many things that Canadians are buying from abroad, not only from the United States, will get a lot more expensive. So the cost of living and inflation challenges will be made much, much worse.
Challenge number 2 under Trump, migration.
On day one, I will launch the largest deportation program in American history to get the criminals out.
Donald Trump is promising to deport 11 million undocumented people from the United States.
What kind of pressure would there be on the Canadian system if that deportation actually is implemented?
Oh, I think they'll be huge.
Givens says Canada could expect more people trying to come here, both legally and illegally.
There's going to be people who want to leave the U.S. and go to Canada. And if that influx increases dramatically, I think it's going to be important for Canada to start thinking proactively about ways to work with other countries. How are we going to manage this flow?
The third challenge under a second Trump presidency, defense spending. NATO countries are supposed to spend 2% of GDP on military and defense. Right now, Canada spends about 1.29%. There's a plan to get to 2% by 2032, but don't expect that timeline to satisfy Trump.
Canada is not seen as pulling its weight, and it will become really fundamental that Canada does come to be seen as pulling its weight if it is to build this kind of positive relationship with the Trump administration that it would like to see.
So what about Harris? If she wins, the change won't be anywhere near as dramatic, but there will still be challenges.
Right off the bat, Canadians can expect trade disputes with the Harris administration. Get ready for a familiar fight over milk and cheese. The Americans want access to Canada's dairy market.
One can count on the fact that dairy will be a top demand for the United States toward Canada.
Also, a Harris administration would push back hard against Canada's digital services tax aimed at U.S. tech companies. The second challenge under Harris, that pressure on defense spending won't go away.
I think that a Harris government is still going to say, hey, Canada, we want to see you get up to that 2% in NATO, but they'll be much more supportive of NATO.
Givens says a Harris administration will be concerned over Russia and China's influence in the Arctic and expect Canada to pay up.
This is just going to be a very hot issue for Canada going forward.
And if Harris wins, there could be an impact on Canadian politics. A Harris victory could send a message to federal Liberals about what can happen when you change leaders at the last minute.
I wouldn't be surprised. I mean, I think there are already a lot of emboldened Liberals who are speaking up, but I think a Harris win would show that it can be done.
We have an opportunity in this election to turn the page on a decade of Donald Trump.
As close as the race is, we may not know who wins the election for a while.
I think we don't have time to panic. I think we have to start laying out scenarios around what will happen and start looking at what are the carrots and what are the sticks that are needed to be deployed in order for Canada to be able to effectively navigate this period.
Both Miller and Givens say Canadians should be patient. Their advice? Plan for both possible presidents and wait.
Ms. Nicholson, it just seems very...
So this piece, guys, now we're dropping in back from that into Canadian federal politics. Have you ever wondered, like, who does tell the Liberal insiders and all the Liberal appointed public servants, like, to do all of these scams and scandals? Who tells them? Stephanie Kusi has the same questions here.
Obvious that the trigger was pulled on buying the $9 million condo immediately after the Prime Minister visited Mr. Clark in New York. It seems very obvious. And as well, it seems that Mr. Clark, as well as the department, put a lot of stock in the listing price. It's just not reasonable. It's not a good accounting practice at all, but unfortunately one that the government uses consistently to count on something before it is sold. It's just accounting is not done this way. Reconciling a budget is not done this way, and the government should not be conducting their business in this way as well. It's incredibly concerning that it seems that you've lied about changing this email, changing the terminology within the email. It just seems very clear that you're not being truthful with the committee today. We just don't know who directed you to speak these truths today to this committee and to Canadians. There have been multiple scandals where the minister said she wasn't informed about things. There's the $9 million purchase on Billionaires Row. There is the warship that docked in Havana alongside Russian ships. She said she didn't know about that. And in each of these instances, including the purchase of the $9 million condo on Billionaires Row, she said that she wasn't informed. Yet all of a sudden, something goes wrong in the media or then in this committee. And
smash the like, guys. Let's see if we can pump up the numbers. Let's get it going.
Then she is informed. She's informed at this time. So what you're saying today doesn't add up. What the minister is saying doesn't add up. It doesn't. It shows competence or lying. One of the two things. And Canadians expect their minister to know what is going on, and they expect their minister, their government, and the government's officials, no matter at what level, not to lie. So we require more information, Mr. Chair, and with this information that we are not uncovering today, I wish we could say we are uncovering and not uncovering, I would like to move the following motion: that in regards to the committee's ongoing study of the purchase of the new official residence for the Consul General, New York, the committee invite former Chief of Staff to Minister Joly, Peter Wilkinson, former Chief of Staff of Foreign Affairs, Deputy Minister Carolina Guy, and Property Branch ADM, Robin Dubois, and Director General of Policy and Planning, Frank, I'm not sure if that's Monsieur or Madame, as referred to by the witness here today. But it's clear we're not getting the answers. Certainly. It's clear we are not getting the answers that we require to, first of all, determine how the minister implicates herself into these significant decisions, and then as well the inconsistency that we've seen with the wording within the email and the timing around the email here today, Mr. Chair. And so as such, I'm putting this motion forward to call these further witnesses. Thank you very much, Mr. Chair. The Treasury Board just recently increased the approval threshold from 4 million.
And we've got some more Stephanie Kusi. She's looking for answers, guys. Just trying to figure out what is going on in our government.
Million to $10 million.
We've got about
I'm sure
20 minutes before
2022. How many real
question
estate
period's supposed to
purchases
start?
did the Minister of Foreign Affairs approve on an annual basis, both before and after this significant change, please?
Mr. Chair, with apologies, that would be outside of my scope and area of expertise. I would be happy to refer the question to my colleague, Stéphane Cousineau.
That's not necessary at this time. Perhaps if Monsieur Cousineau could provide this information to the committee and table it, that would be truly appreciated. Thank you. Minister Joly was appointed as the Minister of Foreign Affairs in late 2021, and it seems shortly after this the threshold was then increased by $6 million. And now the minister suddenly is not required to approve of these costly real estate purchases. And yet the following year, Tom Clark is appointed as Consul General of New York, and immediately after this, work is underway to provide him with a new luxury apartment on Billionaires Row. Does this timing not seem a little suspect to you and seem to the point that things perfectly lined up to allow Mr. Clark to have this new luxury apartment?
Mr. Chair, I can really only speak today to my role in this process, which is limited to these 2 emails that have been presented to the committee. What I can say from my understanding is that this process, I believe, spanned over 10 years, was initiated in 2014, which was 8 years prior to the current head of missions arrival in New York.
According to an ATIP the National Post received, it states that you emailed an executive in the department that the branch in charge of the purchase failed to mention the apartment was on Billionaires Row. I believe this is Monsieur Cousineau's branch. Why did you personally think that it was important for the minister to know that this was located on Billionaires Row? Why did that stand out to you to mention to her?
Mr. Chair, my summary in that email to the Deputy Minister who was acting for the Associate over that weekend was very much to convey the background and all information to ensure that he had the most detailed information to make decisions on the file. What I intended in drafting that email was simply a summary of events that had taken place to that date.
Right. In your introduction, Ms. Nicholson, you indicated that you prioritize issues for the minister. You provide a summary of issues to the minister. What is the title and name of your counterpart with the minister, please?
If I understand correctly, Mr. Chair, if the honourable member is asking for the name of the Chief of Staff in the minister's office?
That's correct, yes. Who do you have these daily conversations with, please?
Oh, with apologies, that was I was speaking to the role of the Associate Deputy Minister. My daily conversations are with the Associate Deputy Minister, who is my boss.
Okay, pardon me, but your counterpart that you have these or bring up points of interest to the minister, who do these occur with?
If I understand correctly, the question, Mr. Chair, in conveying information to the minister's office, that largely goes from our floor to our liaison unit.
I'm going to go to the process then, Ms. Nicholson. What criteria do you personally use to bring something forward to the minister? You said you provide, you prioritize issues and you provide summaries. What information, what flags you personally that something has to be brought to the attention of the minister?
Mr. Chair, the majority of the work that I do in summarizing or prioritizing are areas that the leads within the department, the branches, bring forward to my associate and identify as priorities within the department, or that might be of interest or of need to update in the minister's office. I have never personally identified a priority for the minister.
Okay. How does the minister then flag decisions that are of importance to her?
Mr. Chair, the minister and again, my involvement with this is quite limited, my direct involvement, but my understanding of the process is that the minister conveys to her staff what her priorities are, and those come down to our department via the, we call them a liaison unit that works between the minister's office and the deputy's office.
Did the minister's office ask you to send the July 25th correction?
The minister's office, Mr. Chair, did not ask me to send any correction ever.
Thank you very much, Mr. Chair.
Thanks, Mr. Chair. Minister LeBlanc, you said moments ago that the House of Commons must be safeguarded from foreign interference. I completely agree with you in that regard, and yet the NCCOP report released this week unequivocally states that elected officials, including certain members of Parliament, are working wittingly, and I emphasize the word wittingly.
We'll cross over to the question period after Michael Cooper's finished here. We'll do that.
With hostile foreign states, including frequently communicating with foreign missions, providing foreign diplomatic officials with privileged information, and sending secrets to intelligence officers of foreign states. I would submit that as long as the Prime Minister continues to cover up the names of these compromised MPs, a dark cloud will continue to hang over this place. So I put it to you again, who are the names of these compromised MPs? Who are they? What are the names? What are their names?
Mr. Chair, through you, I'll repeat the answer that I gave to Mr. Cooper's colleague. The release of that sensitive, highly secret intelligence information is governed by law. I think Mr. Cooper knows very well that the
Minister, with respect.
Point of order.
Chair, I was trying to answer the question.
Ms. O'Connell on a point of order.
Mr. Chair, perhaps you need to provide a reminder to committee members that questioners must give equal amount of time for the witnesses to answer. And stop with your pretending of reading the book. I know your favorite thing to do on a Friday night is pretend to be chair, but Mr. Chair, please give a reminder of the decorum around this committee in dealing with witnesses.
Thank you. Well, let's
on the same point of order, Chair.
Mr. Janice on the same point of order.
Yeah, there's no requirement whatsoever for equal time. It's the members' time. That's well established. And whether you read the book on a Friday night or a Saturday night, it will say the same thing on that.
We're getting a debate here. Let us continue. Mr. Cooper, I would appreciate if you give the witnesses a chance to answer the questions you asked.
What use is Ron McKinnon anymore? He should just retire, start a garden or something, whatever. Get a laptop, watch a lot of porn, whatever. He's such a waste, guys. We watch a lot of committees here. McKinnon's one of the worst.
Yes, well, with respect, Minister, I'm not asking you to release the intelligence. I'm not asking you to release sources and methods. I'm simply asking you to release the names. There is no legal impediment preventing you from doing that, preventing the Prime Minister from doing that. So why is the Prime Minister continuing to cover up the...
And that's the point of showing this video, is to illustrate that there's no reason that Trudeau can't release the names. He's hiding and covering things up, but he's saying he's doing it in the name of law and rule and order. Point of order, no, you're not. You're just covering it up.
Names to shield these MPs who are compromised by hostile foreign states.
Mr. Chair, far from it. The Prime Minister and our government have strengthened Canada's ability to detect and counter foreign interference. We're discussing today landmark legislation that the committee is working on that would strengthen the ability of our intelligence agencies and the Royal Canadian Mounted Police to do the important work of holding those that violate Canadian law to account. So, Mr. Chair, again, I have every confidence that...
Minister, we already know that one former Liberal MP, the member for Don Valley North, received help from Beijing to secure the Liberal Party nomination, and we know that the Prime Minister was briefed about that during the 2019 election before that member was elected while he was a Liberal candidate, and the Prime Minister did nothing about it and covered it up for nearly 4 years until he got caught when it was reported in the Globe and Mail. The Prime Minister has a disturbing track record of putting the partisan interests of the Liberal Party ahead of transparency and protecting our democracy and national security. Isn't the real reason the Prime Minister won't release the names because some or all of these compromised MPs happen to be Liberals?
Mr. Chair, through you, I congratulate Mr. Cooper on the clip you probably just tried to get for social media. The simple answer is no.
How many compromised MPs are there? Since you won't release the names, how many are there? Just a number.
Again, Mr. Chair, Mr. Cooper knows full well that the information that underlies the conclusions of our intelligence agencies or the RCMP is highly protected, sensitive information that often comes with caveats from foreign partners.
Minister, I asked you simply for a number. How many compromised MPs are there?
Mr. Chair, Mr. Cooper knows very well, and I get the theatrics. He's very good at that. I think he should be perhaps given a gold star for theatrics. But he also knows,
Minister, this is about as serious as it gets, that we have members of Parliament working for hostile foreign states. You won't release the names. At the very least, Canadians deserve to know how many MPs are compromised. How many?
So, again, Mr. Chair, I explained earlier this week, and perhaps if Mr. Cooper is interested, the director of CSIS or others could explain the challenge of taking...
Minister, perhaps we can narrow it down. Are any in Cabinet? Are any sitting around the Cabinet table?
Mr. Chair, Mr. Cooper can pretend to be a prosecutor if he wants. I was
pretending to be anything. I'm asking you a very straightforward question as to how many compromised MPs there are, and are any in Cabinet. Just an answer.
Thank you, Mr. Cooper. That's your time. The minister may answer if he wishes.
No, Mr. Cooper doesn't seem to be interested in the answer. He's more interested in interrupting, so we'll go to the next question.
Well, I didn't answer.
Screaming.
All right, gang, we're going to take a minute here to say hello to the people that I can see in the room. We've got Annie G. What's up, sister? Autumn Christian. What's up? How you doing? Backyard Garden. Good to see you. Betty Zoom. Bob Boom. CG Visuals. Chris Murray. Good to see you. Dan H. Derek Sittler. What's up? Derek Summers. Good day. Dime Bag Coins. What's shaking, brother? Belt note, any fresh tunes? Guys, check out Dimebag's channel. It's interesting. He does great stuff. Just check it out. Dub Hill, how you doing? Welcome. Gainer 352, what is up? Hammy Hamster, good day. Jennifer O. Captain Kirk, beam me up. Let's get going. Margaret, good to see you today. Mark Maloney, sorry for the Freudian slip the other day. That wasn't on purpose. Mofo13, what's shaking? Mr. Pickles, brother, what's going on? How are you doing today? Yeah, running with that stroller, man. Doesn't take me long to get out of wind. Mudkip1, what is shaking, baby? On a flip side, what is going on? Raz, good to see you, man. How you doing today? Red Rose, always a pleasure. Rickety, good day. What is up? Rory Kennedy, good to see you, brother. Scott Campbell, man, what's shaking out west? Steve Bloys, and Storm, what is shaking? How are you guys doing? Anyways, they are on the floor, I believe. But this is the way it is. This is how much French they use. In a country that really doesn't have very many French people, every time we cut over to them, it's in French. And right now they've got this skank PIERRE up there. And, well, we'll keep her audio down till I'm through talking, because I don't even care what she has to say. She looks like a pleasant lady. She's absolute trash. If you saw her behavior in the last committee meeting that she was taking part in, you'd throw up. Like, she's a disgusting person. I'm so sick of these liberals, man. They're all full of it. Greg Fergus is one of the worst ones.
I don't like to go over
speaking
too
goddamn
much.
Grasslands. After 9 long years, Canadians are desperate for a change from the NDP Liberal government. Food Banks Canada recently released their hunger count report. Over 2 million Canadians are visiting food banks each month. The report found a 6% increase in food bank visits compared to the previous year, which had already broken a previous record. That's what we're seeing happen under this carbon tax regime. That failed socialist experiment starves Canadians and it attacks our energy industry, which is key to Western Canada's economy and fuels prosperity across the country. Back home in Saskatchewan, Food Banks of Saskatchewan has said that children make up 30% of people in need nationally. But in Saskatchewan, that number jumps up for children up to 39%. That's almost a 10% increase. Meanwhile, the total number of visits has gone up 42% since 2019 due to carbon tax, inflation, and housing costs. The Liberals refuse to fix what they broke, and that's exactly why Canadians are demanding change. Conservatives stand ready to axe the tax and bring home affordability. It's time for the Prime Minister to call a carbon tax election. The honourable member from Davenport.
Mr. Speaker, I rise today to commemorate the 101st anniversary of the establishment.
I assure you this chick is blitzed out of her mind. She eats like 10 gummies before every house. Like...
Their first president, Mustafa Kemal Atatürk. Atatürk, beloved to this day by Turks all around the world, and is credited with creating the foundations of modern-day Turkey. Canadians of Turkish origin are a vibrant community whose language, culture, and traditions have enriched the social fabric of Canadian society. Now in 2024, the Canadian-Turkish community has grown to more than 75,000 strong. Organizations such as the Federation of Canadian Turkish Associations and the Turkish Culture and Folkloric Society of Canada work hard to put on important events for the community throughout the year. I want to acknowledge them and thank them for their contributions. Canada is stronger because of our diversity, and the Turkish-Canadian community has made us a stronger and better country. Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
The honourable member from St. Catharines.
Last week, the Conservative leader announced his plan to shut down housing projects across the country. He's proposing reckless cuts that will devastate housing progress in Canada, including in my own riding of St. Catharines. Even his own MPs are going behind his back to secretly write the minister to support the Housing Accelerator Fund and advocate that their communities get the funding their leader wants to cut. Let's be clear about what's at stake. Reckless Conservative housing cuts could jeopardize up to 750,000 homes over the next decade. By his own math, the Conservative leader wants to build at least 450,000 fewer homes. Canadians can't afford these cuts to housing. Conservative MPs need to stand up for their communities and stand up against their leader's reckless housing cuts. We need to build more homes, not less. It's painfully obvious that the Conservative leader is not serious about housing.
The honourable member from Calgary Nose Hill.
Mr. Speaker, last year a report from an international tax watchdog accused Brookfield of dodging taxes around the world, stating that there is an apparent pattern of aggressive tax avoidance consistent across Brookfield's global operations. So it's no coincidence that last week Brookfield, a megacorp chaired by senior Liberal economic advisor Mark Carbon Tax Carney, announced it's moving its headquarters from Toronto to Wall Street. Reports say Brookfield pays a measly average tax rate of 6.1%, but the average Canadian family pays a whopping 45% of their average household income in taxes. Here's the reality. Carney gets paid more if Brookfield pays less tax. And while he works to make sure that his company pays less tax, he wants Canadians to pay more carbon tax, all while he's formally advising the Prime Minister on economic policies without ethics or lobbying guidelines. Colleagues, this is wrong. It's time for the NDP Liberals to stop letting this man put his own profit over the people of Canada.
Hear, hear. The honourable member from Surrey Centre.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Last week we learned that the Conservative leader will reverse Canada's housing progress and cut programs that are building more homes faster in Surrey and across the country. And it's not just his own MPs that disagree with his reckless housing cuts. Mayors across the country, including former Conservative MPs, are sounding the alarm over the cuts. The Housing Accelerator Fund invests in housing in Surrey and every local community across Canada. But the Conservative leader wants to shut these housing projects down. Interest rates are down. Housing starts are up. Housing permits are up. We need to build on this progress, not take it backwards to the days when the Conservative leader was Harper's former failed housing minister. He failed to build more homes back then, and he wants to reverse housing progress now. Canadians can't afford these Conservative housing cuts. We need more homes, and we won't let the Conservative leader stand in our way. Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
Good job. The honourable member from Miramichi Grand Lake.
Mr. Speaker, after 9 years of this NDP Liberal costly coalition, there is only one person keeping the Prime Minister in power. That is the leader of the NDP. Right. Remember the NDP leader's big stunt when he told Canadians he ripped up the coalition deal with the Liberals. It was just a scam on the poor voters of Elmwood-Transcona right before a by-election. The NDP leader said, and I quote, "The fact is, the Liberals are too weak, too selfish, and too beholden to corporate interests to fight for Canadians." While the NDP leader supports the punishing carbon tax, voting for it over 24 times, Canadians visit food banks in record-smashing numbers. Every day the Prime Minister stays in power is because of the leader of the NDP who lacks the courage to do elsewhere. It is time for the Prime Minister to call a carbon tax election now so Canadians can make the choice.
That's right, here.
The honourable member for Levis-Lotbinière. Mr. Speaker, after 9 years, the bloc is not worth the cost of housing. Rents, mortgage payments and down payments have doubled. But the good news is that a Conservative government will slash the federal sales tax on new homes sold across the country. This tax cut will save buyers $40,000 or $2,200 a year in mortgage payments on an $800,000 home. This measure will stimulate the construction of more than 30,000 additional homes a year and give buyers who are struggling to find homes a break. Mr. Speaker, our Conservative proposal has been hailed by the Quebec Property Owners Corporation as a step in the right direction that will ease the cost of housing. Mr. Speaker, the evidence is clear that the only common-sense Conservatives will restore Canada's promise, where hard work guarantees a bigger paycheck that buys food and affordable housing in safe neighbourhoods. Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
The honourable member from Windsor to Tecumseh.
Mr. Speaker, this Friday my wife and I were honoured to join the vibrant and growing Sikh community in Windsor-Tecumseh to celebrate Bundi Chor Divas. We prayed together, lit clay lamps, rolled roti in the kitchen, and shared langar. The news from the RCMP that foreign agents of the Government of India participated in serious crimes on Canadian soil against Sikh Canadians has shaken my community, just as it has shaken all Canadians from coast to coast to coast. To think for even 1 second that a member of my community could be targeted or killed for their religious or political beliefs by an agent working on behalf of a foreign government is abhorrent. An attack on one Canadian is an attack on all Canadians and our shared values of democracy and freedom. Mr. Speaker, it is past time for the leader of the Conservative Party to join all opposition leaders in getting his security clearance. It is past time to put the nation ahead of himself. There is nothing more important than protecting Canadians.
One of these Liberals is gonna get hurt. Before the election, they keep doing this stuff. They're not protected enough. Like, again, I'm just knowing how upset they make me. I'm not gonna do anything about it. I'm not. I do this. But there are people that don't have this to use as a vent. They're just gonna have to act. And they're so arrogant and pompous. So it is a cult. Right? Like, the Liberal caucus is now a cult. It's a woke cult wanting to censor people, make them fat, take away our ability to travel. You know, we're ants to these people. And the woke movement is a cult. And the Liberal NDP coalition is a cult. And they're running our country. Like, a cult should only be a small segment of any given population. But that's not what's happening here. They have their charismatic leader that's supposed to be Trudeau. He's not charismatic, but he duped us all in 2015, didn't he? Yep.
Payments. The response to this plan has been impressive. The Canadian Real Estate Association said a positive move toward lowering building costs, increasing housing supplies, and making home ownership more attainable for Canadians. And Habitat for Humanity concluded that it would reduce costs, passing on savings to Habitat homeowners. Mr. Speaker, it is only the Conservatives that have united industry, advocates, and Canadians on housing, and it is only Conservatives that will build the houses and bring young Canadians home.
The honourable member from Brampton North.
Happy Diwali, Mr. Speaker. Last week I celebrated the Festival of Lights in my riding by going to local mandirs and gurdwaras, and what made Diwali even more special was that the Prime Minister dropped by to celebrate with Bramptonians. Today we'll continue the grand celebration on the Hill, hosted by the Liberal caucus, with many in attendance from across the country. This celebration on the Hill is a testament to our commitment to inclusivity and respect for all communities. In contrast, the Conservative caucus cancelled their Diwali celebration, proving that all the Conservatives care about is themselves. The celebration of Diwali is one that is shared among Hindus and Sikhs, and over the last few days I've witnessed these communities celebrating together in harmony. However, I am also deeply troubled by what took place yesterday. First, the protests and acts of violence that took place outside the Hindu Sabha Mandir, and then the counter-protests and violence that took place at Guru Singh Sabha Gurdwara. Everyone deserves to feel safe and respected in their places of worship. There is no room for such actions in our society. Let's respect the true essence and teachings of Diwali and Bandi Chhor Divas. Come together in respect and unity.
Oral questions. Questions orales. The honourable member from Regina Cpac.
Of this NDP Liberal Prime Minister's economic vandalism, over 2 million Canadians are visiting a food bank in a single month, housing costs have doubled, and inflation continues to eat away at Canadians' paychecks. His massive deficits and tax hikes are causing extreme damage to the Canadian economy. For 8 out of the last 9 quarters, Canadian per-person GDP is down. This is a made-in-Canada, per-person GDP recession. That means Canadian workers work harder but bring home less. So will the Prime Minister stop his economic vandalism and cancel his job-killing, paycheck-shrinking tax hikes?
Yes. The Honourable Minister for Indigenous Services.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. This morning we heard the sad news of the passing of the Honourable Murray Sinclair. Let me take a moment before we begin today to say a few words about him. As a former judge, senator, and chair of the Truth and Reconciliation Commission.
Patty Haydu is a whore. Like, point of order, we've got a whore on the floor. She's taking this opportunity. They just did like 4 hours of statements. That's where this shit is supposed to happen. And now she's going to pull woke and say like, oh, you don't care when people die? I know that there's a time and a place for that.
Murray was determined to help Canada reckon with its colonial realities and bring healing to this country. He was a visionary and a leader, and his kind and fierce commitment to truth has pushed Canada forward in profound and lasting ways. Our hearts and minds are with his family, and Canada is a much better place for his service.
Is that not a story? Like right there, she was asked a direct question, didn't touch it for a second. Telling you, Canadians need to see it and actually watch it in context, like a lot of it, to see what they're doing. Sickening.
The honourable member from Regina Capel.
I join in my honourable colleagues' sending of condolences, but we are witnessing economic vandalism in real time. Last Thursday, this government was briefed that the only sector of the Canadian economy actually producing any growth
was the energy sector. And what did they do today? They slapped a punishing cap on Canadian production.
Exactly.
All this will do is chase investments and jobs to other countries. But that's something this Prime Minister is good at. He's increased Canadian investment into the U.S. by $63 billion last year alone. So will the Prime Minister stop fueling the U.S. economy, cancel his tax hikes, and cancel the production cap to bring those investment dollars back home?
The Honourable Minister for Natural Resources and Energy.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Today, we were very pleased to announce an emissions cap with respect to the oil and gas sector in this country. Given that oil and gas constitutes 31% of Canada's greenhouse gas emissions, it is important that we work with the sector to reduce emissions, just as we do with every sector. It is also true that as we move towards a lower carbon economy across the world, oil and gas produced with the lowest emissions is actually going to have value around the world. We are moving forward with a plan to address climate change and build a strong economy going forward. They are stuck in the past and ignoring the science of climate.
Before I get to the Honourable Member, I'm just going to ask the Honourable Member from Calgary Centre, please, to hold on until his question is turn to ask a question. The Honourable Member from Regina Capel.
All this production cap will do is make other countries richer while making Canadians poorer. But that's something this Prime Minister is so good at. Consider this, GDP per capita in Canada, down. In the U.S., it's up. 9 years ago, average wages in the U.S. and Canada were almost identical. Now, an American worker brings home $22,000 more than their Canadian counterpart. And $500 billion in investments has fled Canada to the United States, creating bigger paychecks for American workers, all because of this Prime Minister's high taxes and massive deficits. The Prime Minister is the #1 job creator in the United States. So instead of helping the Canadian economy, why not fight for Canada for once?
The Honourable Minister for the Environment and Climate Change.
Mr. Speaker, maybe the member opposite should take the time to actually read the information about the pollution cap. Production is forecast to increase 16% by 2030, Mr. Speaker. So this idea that we're somehow cutting production is...
Does anybody give a shit about the environment anymore? Like, I'm not saying, like, to purposely hurt the environment, but we're pretty conscious, like, our regulations are pretty tight as they are. We have a declining economy, or standards of living are going down. Young people can't do anything, which is what they want. They want them not to experience life and have the skills to live on their own so that they can shack them up in these little apartment buildings. Anyways, Stephen Guilbeault, I hope somebody gets him.
Simply not true.
The Honourable Member for Mégantic-L'Érable. After 9 years of this Prime Minister, supported by the Bloc, $500 million has left Canada for the U.S. The Conservatives will bring investment and jobs back to Canada. This Prime Minister's high taxes and deficits have helped the U.S. prosper while Canadians are desperately trying to house and feed themselves. A U.S. worker now earns $22,000 more than his Canadian counterpart. Will the Prime Minister keep abdicating his responsibilities? The Honourable Deputy Prime Minister and Minister of Finance. Mr. Speaker, I'm a patriotic Canadian woman, and I believe that we live in a wonderful country. I wouldn't want to be American. But if the Conservatives want to compare, well, this is what should be compared. Inflation is lower in Canada. The prime lending rate is lower in Canada. The average Canadian's lifespan is 4 years longer. So the Conservatives keep thinking the U.S. is better than Canada. The Honourable Member for Mégantic-L'Érable. What's worse is after 9 years of this Prime Minister, three different U.S. presidents, this government has been incapable of producing wealth in Canada. The gap between wealth is growing, whether it's the softwood lumber or the Buy American Act. This Prime Minister has failed miserably to protect Canadian workers. He's creating more jobs. He's the #1 job creator in the U.S. When will the Prime Minister stand up for Canada, cut taxes, and bring our money and our jobs and our investments back to Canada. The Honourable Deputy Prime Minister and Minister of Finance. Mr. Speaker, once again, here's what we do better in Canada. Inflation is lower. The prime lending rate is lower. The average lifespan is longer. I will quote from David Rosenberg, a well-known economist. He said that last week, investors based in the U.S. should contemplate leaving New York for Toronto. And that's because he knows that Canadian companies are doing better. Who better to quote, Mr. Speaker?
Député de La Prairie.
The Honourable Member for La Prairie. On the eve of the U.S. elections, Peter Harder and other senators must not be blocking our bill to protect supply management in free trade deals, because we know that the U.S. wants to reopen the trade deal. This is not just harmful, it's dangerous because it will cause hundreds of thousands of job losses in Quebec. Will the Prime Minister stop threatening Quebec's farmers? The Honourable Minister of Agriculture and Agri-Food. Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
Mr. Speaker, being a farmer all my life and then being involved in the supply management system for all my agricultural career, I am fully aware of how valuable the supply management system is to this country. And I belong to a government and a party that has initiated supply management and continue to support supply management. And I can tell my honourable colleague in this country that this government will continue to support the supply management program.
The Honourable Member for La Prairie. The next U.S. president could open up NAFTA or the free trade deal in 2026. And depending who wins, it could be our supply management system that pays the price. So our farmers would like to hear their will respected. They don't want two unelected senators to hold up a bill to protect supply management. Will the Prime Minister stop those two senators from preventing C-282 from passing? The Honourable Minister of National Revenue. Thank you, Mr. Speaker. We've already explained to our Bloc friends that senators are independent. And the other thing is that the Bloc admits that they can't protect supply management. The only people who can, because we truly want to and we're committed to doing so, is us. Whatever happens on the other side of the U.S. border, only a Liberal government will protect supply management here.
The Honourable Member from Burnaby South.
In Canada, we believe healthcare should be there when you need it and it should be free. Today, Collège des médecins du Québec Président was quoted saying that patients are typically told, I can do your surgery in 14 months. If you come to my private clinic, I can get it done in 1 month. It'll cost you $25,000. Dr. Trudeau says that's questionable if not illegal. I think it's pretty clearly illegal. Does the Prime Minister agree?
Hear, hear. Hear. The Honourable Minister of Health.
Public, universal, available for all, and most of all, making sure that the patient doesn't pay. That we ensure in our country that when people come in for care, that they're taken care of on the basis of their need, not the size of their bank account. That's what distinguishes us from so many countries in the world. That is a principle that we stand up proudly for. I would suggest to the Leader of the NDP, we've worked well together on things from pharmacare to dental care. There are many different challenges the provinces are presenting to health care right now, and certainly this party opposite, the Conservatives that would seek to ravage our health care system. Let's work together to make sure we protect it.
Again, that's part of the woke cult, that they're going to protect us as they're sabotaging us. They're pissing on your leg and telling you it's raining. It's very frustrating. I will bet a mortgage payment, whatever your mortgage payment is, if you want to make this bet, that he is named as one of the 11.
The Liberals are letting people get charged to get to the front of the line. That should be illegal. Au Québec,
In Quebec, the private sector is taking up more and more of a role in healthcare. The Quebec College of Physicians and Surgeons is calling for this trend to be dealt with as quickly as possible. People who seek profit are causing longer delay times for healthcare. Why is the Prime Minister allowing U.S.-style companies to take advantage of Canadians suffering? The Honourable Minister of Health. Mr. Speaker, that's what's absolutely clear is that it's our government's priority to ensure that our healthcare system is universal and entirely public and available to all Canadians. We've made a lot of headway with dental care and pharmacare, but I think there's a lot of work that can still be done, that should still be done. But on the other side, the Conservative Party wants to cut. They want to make huge cuts to funding for health care, and that's totally unacceptable, Mr. Speaker.
The honourable member from Dufferin-Caledon.
After 9 years of these NDP Liberals, almost 50% of young Canadians believe they will never own a home. This Liberal housing accelerator is an absolute joke. Common sense Conservatives have a plan. They're going to axe the GST on new home builds. On an $800,000 house, this will save $40,000. Wow. And the Conservative leader has now written to the premiers of every province asking them to match this tax cut. When will these NDP Liberals finally get it through their heads? They're funding bureaucracies, axe the tax on new builds so young people can buy a house.
The Honourable Parliamentary Secretary to the Minister of Housing, Infrastructure and Communities.
He says the Housing Accelerator Fund is a joke, Mr. Speaker. Has he consulted with his caucus? A dozen, probably more, Conservative members have advocated specifically for that program. They went behind the back of the Leader of the Opposition because they wanted to advocate for their constituents to see more homes built. By calling for the end of the Housing Accelerator Fund, which is how they would pay for this new, bold idea, so-called, they would end support to communities for homelessness. They would end support for more building for middle-class Canadians. Mr. Speaker, it's an unacceptable, untenable position.
Well said.
The honourable member from Dufferin-Caledon.
Oh man, here's what Liberal housing advisor Mike P. Moffat said about the Liberal Housing Accelerator. Can anyone in the federal government tell me why Toronto deserves $471 million in housing accelerator funds to massively hike development taxes? And housing starts in Toronto are down 20%. Even Liberal advisors know the housing accelerator's a joke. Will these NDP Liberals finally realize they're funding bureaucracies, tripling development charges, and not getting any houses built for young Canadians?
The Honourable Parliamentary Secretary to the Minister of Housing, Infrastructure and Communities.
Young Canadians, he talks about home building in Canada, Mr. Speaker. They have 6 homes to point to when they were in office. Wow. That's the sum total of their work when they were in office, when the Leader of the Opposition held the so-called role.
Look at his lips. You can tell he's lying. Straight up lying to Canadians on this national broadcast. Peter Fragas-Caicos, like you're a shitbird.
Of Minister of Housing. He wasn't a minister at all, Mr. Speaker. In fact, if you look at the 190,000 number that they talk about during their time in office, that was home builders who did that, Mr. Speaker. It was not them. They know nothing about getting homes built. They know only about cuts. They would only make cuts to communities. It's not an acceptable position, Mr. Speaker.
The honourable member from Parry Sound, Muskoka.
After 9 years of this NDP Liberal government, we know they're not worth the cost of housing. So bad is their record, in fact, that 80% of young Canadians believe that home ownership is only for the very rich. Conservatives will axe the federal sales tax on new homes sold under $1 million, saving Canadians up to $50,000 or $2,200 a year in mortgage payments. The Conservative leader has written premiers asking them to match our Conservative plan to axe the tax on housing, saving Canadians thousands more. This means real relief for young Canadians desperately trying to buy a home. Will the NDP Liberals axe the tax on housing so young Canadians can finally buy a home?
The The Honourable Parliamentary Secretary to the Minister of Housing.
Mr. Speaker, I worked with the Honourable Member on the House of Commons committee that's responsible for housing. He almost always brings up good points, except today there's a credibility issue at stake, Mr. Speaker. When he was Mayor of Huntsville, prior to becoming Member of Parliament, he increased development charges, which we agree are an impediment to home building. They are a tax on home building. How much did he increase development charges, Mr. Speaker? Not by 2 or 3%, Mr. Speaker, but by 16%, Mr. Speaker. They can't speak about these issues. They have no credibility on the matter.
Order. The Honourable Member from Parry-Sound-Muskoka.
Well, Mr. Speaker, when I was on council, we actually cut development charges by 50%, and I also knew as a mayor that if you get bureaucracy out of the way, you get more homes built. These guys don't understand that, though. All they're doing is funding the bureaucracy. Since this minister has given billions of dollars to cities all across this country, they've raised development charges and housing starts have dropped. Our common sense plan will save Canadians up to $50,000 on a new home. This is real relief for Canadians. So why can't they get on board and axe the tax on new homes?
The Honourable Parliamentary Secretary.
Mr. Speaker, like former Conservatives, people like Joe Clark, for example, I recognize that Canada is a community of communities. And as an urban-based MP, I want to assure the honourable member opposite that I read the Huntsville Doppler, the newspaper of record in this community. He increased development charges by 16%. It was reported time and again in that newspaper, Mr. Speaker. They want to cut support for communities. They want to cut support for housing. Don't be fooled. The Leader of the Opposition ditched his glasses. Same guy that wants to cut pensions, support for housing, support for young people, support for EI. They're not serious, Mr. Speaker.
L'honorable député de Bellechasse.
The Honourable Member for Bellechasse-les-Etchemins-Lévis. Mr. Speaker, after 9 years, the Bloc Liberal Coalition has discouraged young people from owning their own home. They've doubled rents, mortgage payments, and down payments. As we speak, 80% of Canadians think home ownership is only for the very rich. Our leader has tabled a common-sense proposal, cut the GST on new homes. This idea has the support of Cpac, the Quebec Residential Rental Properties Owners Association. Will the Bloc-backed Liberals scrap the federal tax on housing, or will they keep on funding their own programs that don't build any houses? The Honourable Minister for the Economic Development Agency. Mr. Speaker, my colleague's proposal is completely ill thought out because not only does it not deal with any increase in the supply of housing, it also comes at the expense of the poorest. Their agenda is clear now. They want to help people who want to buy, but cut back for people in need. I'd like to know from my colleague, the housing in her own riding, how is she going to explain to her constituents that she would cut and put in danger the rents of the people who need that housing? The Honourable Member for Bellechasse-les-Etchemins-Lévis. She can ask questions when she's in opposition. Mr. Speaker, the Conservative leader's proposal to scrap the GST on houses under $1 million would give young people the hope of being able to buy a home and maybe start a family. With this GST cut, some 30,000 new homes could be built. For an $800,000 home, for example, the GST savings would be $40,000. What's keeping this Liberal bloc government from showing a little compassion and common sense by going ahead with our proposal? The Honourable Minister of Public Services and Procurement. Thank you, Mr. Speaker. 3 things. First of all, and my colleague knows this, the Conservative leader was responsible for the construction of only 6 housing units during his entire term. Last week, an agreement was what the Conservatives would do would be cutting a deal that has led to the building of thousands of units in Quebec, including units for seniors in need in the members' riding. That's the type of thing the Conservatives would like to cut. The Honourable Member for Lac-Saint-Jean. Quebec is still taking in more than its fair share of asylum seekers. And this is serious. There's still no plan for redistributing them among the other provinces. Immigration could skyrocket with tomorrow's U.S. election, and Donald Trump has said if he wins, he'll launch the largest deportation program in U.S. history. He wants to deport 18 million people. We asked the minister if he had a plan in case Trump's promises drive people into Canada, and he said yes. That's great. Now, can he explain that plan, Mr. Speaker? The Honourable Minister of Immigration. The member knows full well that for a number of months we've been reducing the number of asylum seekers arriving by 29% in Quebec. And this is the type of thing we can do by working together with Quebec in order to have a well-managed border with the U.S. And we will continue to do that regardless of who's the president tomorrow. But it's maybe premature to be talking about that. The Honourable Member for Lac-Saint-Jean. Mr. Speaker, to govern is to plan, and the Immigration Department has proven at every conceivable opportunity that they're not very good at it. So we're going to keep asking the Minister for details of this plan, because without details, there's no good reason to believe it even exists. Tomorrow, if Trump wins, he's promised to deport 18 million people. Our organizations tell us if they're worried about a wave of immigration when Canada is already unable to manage the current influx of asylum seekers, well, what's coming? What's the plan if that happens? The Honourable Minister of Immigration, Refugees and Citizenship. Mr. Speaker, there is a plan, but I'm not going to tell him about it 24 hours before an election. That would be very imprudent, very irresponsible to do here in the House of Commons now. The Honourable Member for Lac-Saint-Jean. Well, if he doesn't want to answer questions, he shouldn't show up at question period. Mr. Speaker, the last time Donald Trump threatened to deport people, many headed for Canada. The result was Roxham Road, and we're still suffering the consequences. The result was Roxham Road because the federal government had no plan. The Prime Minister issued a blanket invitation to a wave of immigration without making the slightest preparations to get ready for it. And then it took him years to react. Today, Trump is setting the table for an even bigger wave than the one on Roxham Road. Nobody wants to live through that all over again. What's the plan? The Honourable Minister of Immigration, Refugees.
Thank you, Jan Kaur. Very much appreciate it. You're very generous. Thank you very much.
Refugees and Citizenship. I won't do like the Bloc does constantly. We do have a plan. We'll keep working on it regardless of who's president tomorrow. This is not something that we're going to discuss on the floor of the House of Commons 24 hours before a U.S. election. So unlike the Bloc, we'll talk about that later.
After 9 years of these NDP Liberals, they are not worth the cost of housing. 50% of young Canadians have abandoned the dream of buying a home one day. Rent, mortgage and down payment costs have all doubled. Common sense Conservatives will axe the federal sales tax on new homes sold. On an $800,000 house, this will save home buyers $40,000 or $2,200 a year in mortgage payments. Our plan means more housing for young Canadians desperately trying to enter the housing market for the first time. Will the NDP Liberals axe the GST on housing for more young Canadians so they can finally buy a home?
The Honourable Parliamentary Secretary to the Minister of Housing, Infrastructure and Communities.
Mr. Speaker, as we've seen, the Conservatives continue to say that they'll make cuts to pay for their proposals, including this GST initiative, so-called. So what will that mean? It means the Accelerator Fund will come to an end. The member is from Kelowna. A few weeks ago, I met with Kelowna's Mayor Tom Dias, who shared with me that federal funding secured through the Housing Accelerator Fund has led to a digital permit system that's improved approvals that would have taken even a year ago, a year and a half plus to approve. That approval permit process now is less than 10 days, Mr. Speaker. Huge change.
The Honourable Member from Kelowna Lake Country.
Well, even the Liberal Housing Advisor, Mike P. Moffat, on the failed Liberal Housing Plan said the federal Liberals have lost the plot. Habitat for Humanity said reducing GST would reduce costs. Canadian Home Builders Association said it will make a big difference. Canadian Real Estate Association said this proposed step is a positive move forward, lowering building costs, increasing housing supplies, and making home ownership more attainable for Canadians. Will the NDP Liberals axe the GST on housing so more for young Canadians can finally buy a home?
The Honourable Parliamentary Secretary to the Leader of the Government in the House of Commons.
Yes, Mr. Speaker, the simple answer is the Conservative policy on housing is a dud. That's the bottom line, Mr. Speaker. And let me tell you about an issue that Canadians are truly concerned about. You have the leader of the Conservative Party that continues to refuse to get a security clearance. I believe Canadians have a right to know why it is that the Conservative leader refuses to get it. What is he hiding? Is there something about his past that Canadians should know about? It's time the leader step up and be honest with Canadians.
The Honourable Member from Mission Maskey Fraser Canyon.
Mr. Speaker, after 9 years of NDP Liberals, they are simply not worth the cost of housing. There are encampments all over the city of Abbotsford, including our beloved Cenotaph. Young people are feeling hopeless, knowing that even with a good salary, they will not be able to afford a new house. Conservatives understand that, and that's why we've proposed to a federal GST on new homes, a tax cut that will spark 30,000 new developments. Will the NDP Liberals axe the federal GST on housing so more young Canadians can finally buy a home?
There you go.
The Honourable Parliamentary Secretary to the Minister of Housing, Infrastructure and Communities.
They want to pay for this idea by slashing the Housing Accelerator Fund. So let's understand what that means, Mr. Speaker. This is support for communities across the country, large and small. Support for communities to get people off the street and into homes. Support for zoning changes that will allow for more building. Giving young people, the ones that they talk about and then claim to care about here today, more options. You give people more options, the the costs come down, Mr. Speaker. Infrastructure support, so that water connections, for example, can be connected to housing. They don't believe in that either. Support for vacant buildings to be converted into housing, Mr. Speaker. All of this is on the table.
The Honourable Member from North Island, Powell River.
Mr. Speaker, Persian Gulf War veterans are asking this government for recognition. Brave soldiers came home with Gulf War illness, PTSD, and burn pit poisoning. And still they have to fight the Liberals to get the recognition and benefits they deserve, just like they had to fight the Conservatives before them. It is shameful. Will the minister make this right and grant these veterans wartime status, or will she hide behind legislation and disrespect their service?
Hear, 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 hear. The Honourable Parliamentary Secretary to the Minister of des Anciens Combattants.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I think the Committee on Veterans Affairs has currently studied this matter. We're waiting for their report, and I can assure you that the government will respond to that forthwith. The Persian Gulf War veterans have done a great service for this country, and we all deserve to see their response from this report, and I assure you that the government will respond accordingly. Thank you.
The Honourable Member from Windsor West.
Mr. Speaker, the Liberals have done nothing to protect Canadians from giant telcos pricing gouging. For weeks, hundreds of Canadians are raising their voices because they feel bamboozled. They signed a service contract, were promised a price, then the bills come in with even higher prices. Giant telcos are digging deeper in Canadian pockets. Meanwhile, Liberals sit on their hands and Conservatives are silent as to not upset their CEO donors. Canadians deserve better. Will the minister finally use his powers to stop these snake oil salesman tactics that the telcos use to trick Canadians?
The Honourable Parliamentary Secretary to the Minister of Innovation.
Well, thank you, Mr. Speaker. We expect all telecommunication companies to clearly communicate contract terms and pricing changes to its customers. The minister has spoken directly with Rogers on this important issue. And in the past two budgets, we've taken critical steps to crack down on unnecessary fees and eliminate switching charges so customers can cancel.
So does, like, Turnbull have an extra gene or something? Like, Lord.
And switch to cheaper plans and access lower charges. Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
The Honourable Member from Mississauga Malton.
Mr. Speaker, very recently we've seen acts of unlawfulness and indecency at the Hindu Sabha Mandir in Brampton and the Shri Guru Granth Sabha in Malton. Speaker, the vast majority of Canadians are peace-loving and believe that every Canadian should have the right to practice their faith freely and safely. We've also heard from the RCMP that foreign elements are seeking to destabilize the harmony in our communities to provide evidence for their own rhetoric. These actions must be condemned. Can the minister please comment on these incidents? and tell Canadians what the government is doing to keep them safe. Thank you.
The Honourable Minister for Diversity, Inclusion and People with Disabilities.
Mr. Speaker, we strongly condemn acts of violence, hate that took place outside Hindu Sabha Mandir and Guru Singh Sabha Gurdwara. These acts need to stop. Everyone deserves to feel safe in their places of worship. I've spoken to Peel Regional Police Chief Nish and have full confidence in our local authorities to investigate and to de-escalate. As Canadians, Mr. Speaker, we must stand united against hate and against all those who try to destabilize peace and unity between our communities. Thank you.
The Honourable Member from Bay of Quinte.
Mr. Speaker, after 9 years of this Liberal NDP government, Canada has become the caboose to America's high-flying economic engine. The GDP per capita has become so stark that the average American worker is now making $22,000 more than the Canadian worker. Why? Well, because Americans don't pay a carbon tax. They don't have high fly-raising capital gains taxes. And they don't have soft trade policies. So when will this Prime Minister finally admit that his high taxes, soft trade policies have derailed Canadian prosperity, or is he content in keeping Canadian workers riding in the back in the caboose?
Good question. The Honourable Deputy Prime Minister and Minister of Finance.
Mr. Speaker, the Conservatives may have an inferiority complex vis-a-vis the United States, but I sure don't. Let me tell you what's better in Canada. Inflation is lower. Interest rates are lower. We live 4 years longer because we have a universal single-payer healthcare system. And you know what? Investors are noticing the Canadian advantage. Here's what David Rosenberg said last week. U.S.-based investors should strongly consider moving from New York to Toronto because returns here are better, too.
The Honourable Member from Bay of Quinte.
Amazing, Mr. Speaker, because the Liberal candidate Mark Carney moved his company to New York. But let me tell you what's actually happening in the Canadian economy. 90,000 jobs have been lost since 2015 in the softwood lumber industry. 90,000 jobs, 40,000 of them in BC alone. The last Prime Minister figured the softwood lumber deal in 79 days. It's been 9 years and 3 U.S. presidents. How many jobs have to be chopped before he figures out, this Prime Minister figures out that high taxes and a weak, soft spine won't bring jobs back and paychecks to Canadians and across the softwood lumber industry?
The Honourable Deputy Prime Minister and Minister of Finance.
Mr. Speaker, we will take no lessons from these weak Conservatives when it comes to standing up for the Canadian national interest. And that's because we remember the 232 steel and aluminum interests that the U.S. imposed on us. And when we did that, we retaliated. We had the guts to do that. And you know what the Conservatives said? They urged us to back down. They said that retaliation was dumb. They would sell Canadian interests out again in a minute. We will never do that.
The Honourable Member for Chicoutimi-Le-Fjord. Mr. Speaker, after 9 years and 3 American presidents, this Prime Minister has failed to renegotiate the softwood lumber agreement. He failed where the previous Conservative Prime Minister succeeded. And that just 90 days after being elected. After the closing of the sawmill in Maniwaki and in Mauricie, we now learned that another sawmill is about to close its doors in Quebec. Why are the Liberals continuing to abandon forestry workers?
The
Honourable Minister of Exports and International Development, Trade. Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
So, you guys know who this troll Mary Ng is. She's the minister of the People's Republic of China. And then she comes out all indignified, acting like she's insulted that she's been accused of the crimes that she's committed.
Sure.
I want to thank the honourable member for that question. As he well knows, softwood lumber, the forestry industry, is really important in creating thousands and thousands of jobs across this country. Right. We've been working very hard with the forestry industry. But what I've also learned from the sector is that they're really looking to expand into new markets. And I'm very pleased that our government, the Trade Commissioner Service, is really helping them to access new markets while at the same time working to continue to try to get a deal with the United States. Thanks so much.
The Honourable Member for Chicoutimi-Le-Fjord. Mr. Speaker, I'll say it again, 3 American presidents. And 9 years later, this Liberal Prime Minister has still not managed to renegotiate a softwood lumber agreement. That's pure incompetence and a clear lack of leadership. 3 sawmills have closed their doors in just a few months. The most recent in Saint-Ludger-de-Millau. It's a village of 600 people. 100 of those people are about to lose their jobs. When will there be elections so that our leader can succeed where this Prime Minister has lamentably failed?
The Honourable Minister for International Trade.
What I would say to those wonderful workers and the sector that they belong to, they contribute tremendously not only to the economy of Quebec, but certainly to the economy of Canada. But I do have a question for the member opposite, and that is for his leader. And why is the leader not going to get his security clearance so that he can protect Canadians? That's right.
The Honourable Member for Repentigny. The Environment Minister's announcement today is extremely disappointing. It's been 2 years since he presented his intention to regulate a cap on GHG emissions in the oil and gas sector. And you can understand our impatience, but there's nothing in the minister's announcement which will reduce oil production. Quite the contrary. He says that it's going to go up by 16%. No effort required for big oil. The oil companies will continue to beat production records with the approval of this Liberal government. When will they start to really fight climate change? The Honourable Minister of the Environment and Climate Change. Mr. Speaker, I don't know what to say. The Bloc Québécois has been encouraging us to interfere in provincial jurisdictions. The world is turning upside down. Natural resources, as the Bloc Québécois knows very well, is provincial jurisdiction. So what we will do is act on pollution, and that's exactly what we're doing, Mr. Speaker. The sector is going to have to reduce its greenhouse gas emissions by 35% under 2019 levels. This is an important element in our climate change plan. And on this side of the House, we believe in climate change. We have a plan for the economy, and we have a plan for the future of workers in the sector. The Honourable Member for Jonquière. What the minister isn't saying is that there's a major part of the money that's coming from Quebec. 9 years now the Liberals have been in power, and the Bloc has been calling for a cap on oil and gas sector GHG emissions. 3 years ago they promised to do it. 2 years ago they tabled a draft regulation without putting anything into place, and all that to end up with regulations that don't require any results from the oil and gas sector before 2030. It's that inaction that's going to lead us straight into the wall in 2030. Not the upcoming election, not the opposition party. So why is the minister incapable of requiring even just a little effort from the oil and gas sector before 2030? The Honourable Minister of the Environment and Climate Change. Mr. Speaker, I have a lot of respect for my honourable colleague, but I would sincerely invite him to read the documentation on the oil and gas sector emissions cap, which requires that the regulations come into effect in 2026, not in 2030, as he said. We presented the document a year ago, not 2 years ago, Mr. Speaker, and if since the Bloc Québécois seems to be so eager to go to elections with the Conservatives, well, they can do it, but there won't be a cap on emissions in the oil and gas sector if they do that. They'll be able to pollute all they want under a Conservative government.
Member from Ban-Fairtree.
After 9 years of NDP Liberals, taxes are up, costs are up, crime is up, and time is up. The cost of the carbon tax is sending record numbers of Canadians to food banks, but food banks are struggling with the carbon tax too. For one Alberta food bank, paying the carbon tax means that there is $280,000 less food for those who are going hungry. This Prime Minister's policies are hurting the most vulnerable and those who work to help them. So will the Prime Minister finally call a carbon tax election so Conservatives can fix what he broke?
The Honourable Parliamentary Secretary to the Leader of the Government.
Mr. Speaker, we all know that the leader of the Conservative Party had a flip-flop when it came to the price on pollution. But where we're really disappointed is that we have a leader of the Conservative Party who refuses to put Canadians' interest ahead of his own personal interest and the interests of the Conservative Party. It's time that the Conservative leader step up to the plate and get the security clearance that's needed, Mr. Speaker.
See, the thing is, the people that are watching here, we all know that right now, I guess it's not lying, but he is being deceptive and dishonest, saying that because there's no purpose to Poilievre getting a security. I wouldn't personally want one because there's nothing I could do with it. Like, and Trudeau could just let him know, but no, they don't do that. They make this big thing. They're fake as fuck, man. I'm so fed up with these fucking liberals.
In dealing with foreign interference. What is he hiding, Mr. Speaker? He needs to be transparent. He has to tell us about his past. There's something there he needs to tell Canadians, Mr. Speaker.
The honourable member from Banff Airdrie.
What an insult that is to Canadians who are going hungry. Yeah. And that's not only that, but it's Veterans Week, and there's far too many of the heroes who bravely served Canada who now cannot count on sitting down to their next meal. In fact, food insecurity amongst veterans has gotten so bad due to the NDP Liberal carbon tax that some legions are having to divert the funds from their poppy campaigns to instead help keep the local food banks afloat. So when will the Prime Minister call a carbon tax election so common sense Conservatives can ensure that veterans finally get the respect that they deserve?
The Honourable Parliamentary Secretary to the Leader of the Government in the House of Commons.
Yes, Mr. Speaker, let me tell you what an insult is. When you have the Leader of the Conservative Party continuing to focus his attention on his personal interests and the interests of the Conservative Party, Mr. Speaker. Let's be clear. The Leader of the Conservative Party is hiding something. There's something about his past that he does not want Canadians to know. Mr. Speaker, there is an obligation for the Leader of the Conservative Party to come clean and tell Canadians what it is that he's hiding. Why won't he get that security clearance?
Order. Order. The honourable member from Moose Jaw, Lake Centre, Lanigan.
Mr. Speaker, costs are up, crime is up, and time is up. Moose Jaw's food bank faced a temporary closure due to rising costs of food and lack of donations this summer. It used to be people facing temporary hardship were the ones that used the food bank. Now, it's people with good jobs being forced to use the food bank because the cost of everything has gone up. Mr. Speaker, when will this Prime Minister call a carbon tax election so people can put something under the tree and on their table this Christmas?
The Honourable Parliamentary Secretary to the Minister of Innovation.
Well, I'm glad to hear the member opposite use the word security again. You know, what this House should be preoccupied with, and that all Canadians are preoccupied with is the overwhelming question that they can't answer as to why the Conservative leader will not get his security clearance. It's been months and months and months. This House has been preoccupied with foreign interference, and yet the Conservative leader won't step up and do the very basic thing that all other party leaders in this House have done, which is to get a security clearance and protect the country.
Yeah.
The honourable member from Coquitlam, Port Coquitlam.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, our kids need help. The internet is not a safe place for them right now. We need to hold online platforms accountable and put the safety of our children first by passing the Online Harms Act. Unfortunately, we can't debate this bill because all business in the House is stalled in a Conservative delay tactic. Amanda Todd's mother, Carol, one of my constituents, recently spoke to the Globe and Mail calling for us to debate and pass Bill C-63. Can the Minister of Justice and Attorney General explain why parents across the country, including Carol, are urging us to pass the online...
The Honourable Minister of Justice and Attorney General.
Mr. Speaker, I want to thank Carol Todd for her courage. Carol's daughter, Amanda, tragically died by suicide 12 years ago after being victimized online. Now Carol is calling on every parliamentarian to take action and pass the Online Harms Act. To quote Carol, she said, "The filibuster that is happening right now and holding everything up is frustrating. It's just wasting time. I've waited 12 years for this. Conservatives have shown they will not prioritize children or protecting them. But I put it to the Bloc and the NDP that they have the power right now to stop this filibuster, protect kids, and pass this bill. Will they?"
The Honourable Member from Thornhill.
Two hardened criminals, a stolen car, and a police chase. It's not the plot of a blockbuster movie, it's daily life in Canada after 9 years of this Prime Minister. This weekend, the Toronto police officers tried to arrest two car thieves. But not before the crooks injured a horse, rammed a bunch of vehicles, destroyed a business, and put innocent shoppers in danger. We know that both offenders were out on bail thanks to the Liberal NDP catch-and-release policy that has made this country more dangerous for victims and more lenient for criminals. So why was this government putting police and the public at risk instead of putting criminals in jail where they belong?
The Honourable Minister of Justice and Attorney General.
That member talks a big game, but when it comes to GTA politics, let's actually assess what police officers are saying. The Deputy Chief of Police in York Region has said, if you actually want to get tough on bail, you need to support the courts, the Crowns, and fix the detention centres. Guess who has jurisdiction over all of that? The member from Thornhill should know that's the province. You want to get tough on dealing with bail? Let's have the province support criminal justice in this country and keep our communities safe.
No members are very passionate about many issues. I'm going to ask the member from Kamloops, Thompson, Caribou, as well as the member from Sarnia, Lambton, please, not to take the mic unless recognized by the chair. The Honourable Member from Thornhill.
That answer is offensive to every single police officer who puts their life on the line and offensive to every single Canadian who has been a victim of violent crime. Last year, 8 police officers were killed in just 7 months, and violent crime has gone up 30%. Scenes like the one from downtown Toronto are no longer extraordinary. They are becoming the norm under his watch. Provincial governments, municipalities, police associations said they all want change, but the minister responds with that, whatever that was. His recklessness is turning criminals out onto the streets and putting the public at risk. Why is he the only one that doesn't see it?
The Honourable Minister of Justice and Attorney General.
Let's listen to police officers. Here's the Deputy Chief of York Region. There's just not simply enough court space to hold contested bail hearings. Let's listen to the National Police Federation, who pointed out, newsflash, that when you have JPs with no legal training, sometimes there may be some issues with their rendering of decisions and keeping our community safe. Where do they train JPs legally before they appoint them? Nova Scotia. Maybe that's a lesson that Doug Ford could take. If she needs it in a 3-word slogan.
How much blow did this guy have? Look at how twitchy he is. Stand still, you bitch. I'm too frustrated today, guys. I can't talk anymore.
Here it is. Talk to the Premier.
Order, please. The Honourable Member for Charlebourg, Haute-Saint-Charles. Philippe Léger in the Journal de Montréal said that police's concerns about gangs in Montreal is scary. The Montreal Police Service says that Montreal is becoming like Marseille in France, a place where the authorities are losing control. Mr. Léger said that if the criminal world has changed, our laws need to change as well, starting with mandatory minimum sentences for all criminals who are recruiting young people to commit crimes. Does the Prime Minister agree, or will he continue to stand with criminals? The Honourable Minister of Public Safety. Mr. Speaker, we will continue to work with police organizations. My colleague mentioned the police force in Montreal. We regularly have discussions with the chief. I spoke with him as recently as last week. We are supporting the important work that they're doing. We're also supporting the important work of the RCMP and the Border Services Agency, who have a role to play in supporting municipal and provincial police forces. This is work that we are doing. This is work that the Conservatives forgot to do, and they cut those organizations. The Honourable Member for Alfred Bellin. Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Over 1 million Canadians have already received dental care thanks to the Canada Dental Plan that our government has put in place. This is a historic investment which will benefit Canadians, but the Conservative members voted day after day against this program, which is benefiting Canadians and Quebecers. And they keep saying that the program doesn't exist and that they have the intention to cut it. Can the Minister of Fisheries please explain how this program is helping Quebecers get the dental care that they need? The Honourable Minister of Fisheries and Oceans and the Canadian Coast Guard. Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Over 1 million Canadians, including 325,000 Quebecers, have already received care under our dental care program. The Conservatives are playing games with the health of Canadians and Canadian seniors by offering nothing more than slogans and cuts to the programs that they need. Canadians and Quebecers deserve a government that cares about health care. On our side of the House, we know that the Conservatives only want to make cuts, no matter how many seniors will be affected by that. What's the Conservatives' hidden agenda, Mr. Speaker?
The Honourable Member from Hamilton Centre.
This morning, the BC Maritime Employers Association imposed a bad faith lockout on over 700 ILW Local 514 workers at BC ports. This blatant attempt to manipulate this Liberal government into undermining workers' rights is an outrageous assault on free collective bargaining. So, will this Liberal minister categorically reject any intervention that would force these port workers to give up their collective bargaining rights, or will he bow to the employer?
Yes. Honourable Minister of Labour and for Seniors.
Mr. Speaker, I spoke with the BC MEA and the ILWU on the weekend and reminded them that it is their responsibility to their members and to each other, to Canadians, to farmers, to workers, to businesses, to get a deal. It is their responsibility, and they need to do the work necessary to get an agreement.
The Honourable Member from Kitchener Centre.
Mr. Speaker, keeping track of the tens of billions this government gives to big oil's gamble on carbon capture, it's near impossible. Yet for proven solutions like public transit, no new funds till after the next election, a fraction of what carbon capture gets, and transit operations won't even be eligible. We could add $4 billion for public transit tomorrow by taxing the excess profits of the oil and gas industry. So when will this government put in place an excess profits on that of the oil and gas industry and put it towards reducing fares and improving service on public transit?
The Honourable Minister for the Environment and Climate Change.
Mr. Speaker, and I thank the Honourable colleague for his question. First, the federal government is investing historic amounts in public transit, Mr. Speaker, $30 billion. There are more than 400 kilometres of subway lines being built in Canada right now because of federal investment. Second, we're the only country in the G20. No other country in the G20 has phased out subsidies to fossil fuels. We're the only ones that have done that, despite a commitment made under the previous government to do that, on which they did absolutely nothing, Mr. Speaker. We're there to help Canadians with transit, but we're also there to fight climate change.
Je voudrais signaler.
I'd like to order, please.
All right, guys. I'm getting out. I'm not having a great day. That made me so angry. And I know it's going to get worse for a long period of time before it gets better. People can say that voting's all we can do, and I suppose it is. The way I feel right now, I would do something on my own that whole cabinet would be gone. It'd be better for Canada. Anyways, I can't believe that this is how they're treating our nation. I cannot believe where they're steering us. And then when you say like you're steering us in the wrong direction, they throw it back in your face about some... Anyways, I'm not affected by that anymore. Say whatever in the fuck you want. Do whatever in the fuck you want. I'm at the end of it, guys. I guess I'm just sick. Anyways, we're getting out. Thank you all for tuning in. We'll catch you next time. We're out. Everyone has an opinion about Canadian federal politics. Oh, yeah.
I think our leader, Trudeau, I don't think I've ever heard him say a true word.
Oh, hello. Do you have a warrant to be here? Oh, yeah.
It's time for a change in this country, my friends. A real change.
Wiggle and squirm as you might, it is really hard to put lipstick on a pig.
When I'm Prime Minister, I will keep my promises. WTF. Here.
I know this place is where I am. No other place is better. No matter where I go, I am proud to be Canadian. I am, you know I am. The world that works out. Another cut, right? You know I am. I am Canadian. Come on! I love this country where I am. This land is where I make my stand. The mother fruit gets truer than
The one we call Canadian.
Gentlemen, beam me aboard.
Sorry, gang.